Oh, that's good.
So much for having
Sorry,
and
Asilia.
thanks, George, again. I'm an assistant professor at SUNY New Paltz in upstate New York. I am in the Department of Educational Studies, and I also have affiliate appointments in women, gender, sexuality studies and art. Um, so I guess that's it, right? Is there anything else I'm supposed to say? I have not been able to attend one of these normally because I teach during this time. But I am very excited to be here. And yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, great.
And you get to know the people in the room a bit better as we go along. But also, if the group stays this size, what we can do maybe at some point introduce ourselves to you. What do you think, George? Would that be an idea? Maybe not for the recording. Okay. We can do this in the Beth is also coming. So
Would you like me to share the Google Doc just to give people an idea of the structure for today?
that's a good idea. Just show you what we're going through, the lesson plan. So we've gone through one, you'll be pleased to hear. So welcome and permission to record. We are now sharing this Google Doc. And then we're going to read aloud probably memory for starters. So memory is one of the entries in the glossary. We're going to then have a small group discussion in the breakout rooms. Then we have a whole group discussion. And then we're just going to conclude. Now, just to say that Asilia needs to go somewhere else at 20 past. So that is for us 20 past 5. And then wherever you are in the world, you can work this out. So we have a session of 1 hour and 20 minutes. If we are here, very welcome to stay another 10 minutes. So if there's still a lot to talk about, then we can stay a little bit longer. But if not, we just finish at 1 hour and 20 minutes from now. So yeah, let's start with the reading. So we do it the way we normally do it is a volunteer just starts reading. And then if you have any questions for clarification or you want to make a comment, just let us know. And so this is an entry that Asilia wrote, and then I deflected through. For people who have been here every week, you now know the format. More people are coming in, and okay, so who would like to read? Unless Cecilia wants to read. But it might be someone else. It's just the way I see it standing there, that first sentence, but it's entirely up to anybody who would like to read that.
I can start if no one else wants to, but I would also be happy to listen to someone else read. Okay, I'll start then. I believe in ghosts. I've dreamed of them. I've seen them walking home. I've also heard them. I've woken up to my grandmother's laughter long after she died. It does not matter if ghosts are real in the way we often imagine things being real. Ghosts, to my thinking, are lingering figments of an experience, a person, or a place that is not coherent enough to become a memory, too uncertain to become knowledge. For most of my adult life, I've lived in places where street memorials were commonplace. They're often on the sides of buildings, a colorful rendering of the person who has died, with the hopeful words framing their face. Sometimes teddy bears and candles are placed on the ground nearby. People remembered in this way are often those who die what Christina Sharp calls ungrievable deaths. These memorials are a visual resistance to being ungrievable. They are a refusal to forget. We who encounter them must also remember. They are a public memory event. They are temporary, like all memories. When the neighborhood is gentrified, these memorials will go the same way that many residents go. Those memories will become ghosts, a vapor fading into the atmosphere, hopefully to be excavated by someone who is attuned to ghosts. Memory is a tricky thing. The trickiness of memory is often unacknowledged and unnamed. It's fluid, embodied, partial, and shifting. Despite this trickiness, memory is widely understood as a straightforward recollection of the past. One only has to think about it for a minute to recognize that this is an insufficient definition. Yet, it is the one that has the most currency in a culture that relies on memories, the recollections of some, often at the direct expense of others. Put differently, memory cannot be known without accounting for power. Who, what gets to remember? The fluidity and selectivity are mentioned only when serving those in power. He said, she said is a convenient framing that makes equivalent the memories of those harmed and of those doing the harm. The definition of memory is disciplined and produced in institutions like courts, schools, jails, and financial institutions. Long memories do harm to the same people, and that harm is always done with things like credit scores, court records, and objective data. In this way, memory can reinforce social hierarchies that position some as absolute others, ineligible to become subjects. Short memories are produced by expunged records, incomplete archives, rewrites of the past made for TV movies that humanize serial killers, second chances selectively given, and clean slates that become entitlement. Put differently, even memory cannot escape the structure of uneven social violence and selective conferral of humanity. Not all memories matter to the telling of the past. Some people's memory matters so little it's almost as they do not even have them. It is as though they do not exist at all.
Shall I just continue? I might as well, unless people want to stop here. No, shall I go on? Kyoga Hayashi's travel hopping helps to trace memories that have hitherto not mattered. It's a trans-individual commitment to undo the injustices committed to those who are no longer there, including our childhood selves, with no pretense that the past can be undone. Unlike time travel, that assumes a linear ordering of space and time, as hopping suggests, the method works with a plural and contradictory past. In a travel hopping way of reading, the ghosts of the past, memory is not the property of individual subjects, but a material condition written into the flesh of the world. In Barad's post-humanism, essential realism, the past is not simply given, and remembering is not a subjective activity of the human mind, nor are ghosts only human. Remembering an embodied reconfiguring of past and future is larger than any individual because past events are neither singular nor locatable, and they leave traces, but not as a linear record as though beads on a string. Barad argues that the quantum eraser experiment suggests that the past remains open to future reworkings. Memories can never simply be erased, overwritten, or recovered because the past is not closed or finished. On the contrary, then bleeds through now. While existing multiple temporalities, the researcher's task is to trace the thick now as a phenomenon, like living inside Maguire's interactive haunting and haunted ghost story here, involving a temporal reading of place. Wow, that's quite a lot, hey? So what we suggest is that there are now 13 minus us, so 10. Oh, I love the horns. So I will put you in breakout rooms of maybe 3. Would that work? Or are you going to do it, George? Yeah.
Yeah, I can do it.
And then,
Okay.
Asilia, would you like to join any of the groups?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you can
Oh,
put me in one as well.
hold on.
Not the same one.
Hold on. Asilia, I'm making you a co-host so that you can join and leave groups as you wish.
Usually what we
Yeah.
do, we just like a little bit fly on the walls and go in and comment, and then we can always just hop into another one.
Cool.
And how many minutes have we got?
We should do like 15-ish. No, Bunky asked, are we addressing a specific question? What do you think, Asilia?
I mean, I had a question kind of without knowing the group about kind of how people are thinking about memory in their own work. And maybe how some of this either kind of aligns or diverges or complicates some of the ways that you're thinking about memory.
That's nice.
That's really
Maybe-
nice.
Shall we put that in chat? Do you think?
I can do it.
Okay,
Thank
lovely.
you.
We're all back here.
Oh, eh? What's happening?
Sorry,
How
I
is
don't
it
know what
just
happened
our
there.
group?
Sorry, I think I disappeared, but then I returned. Yeah, I mean, I think that's I like that idea of the thisness, how it's almost as though you're saying that those, is it perhaps seemingly unimportant things become important?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I can relate to that in interviews, definitely.
And it's not unimportant. Maybe it's almost the tiny insignificant that seem insignificant. Like they always are important.
They matter.
Yeah.
Mm.
Asilia, would you like me to put that whiteboard up with the table?
Sure, yeah. That sounds great. Thank you. I'm just
Sure.
putting something in the chat that I mentioned in our
Could I ask, are we going to, okay, yeah, there's the voice question. Okay, we're just doing that together here. Okay.
And just in case people don't know, but you know the grab, it's not very nice, but you see the hand on the right-hand bottom. If you click on that, then you can actually move the. It took me a while for me to figure that one out, but then you can just move yourself around the screen without necessarily affecting anybody else, because in the beginning I thought, oh, if I do that and everybody else is going to, but it's not. Apparently it's different on each person's screen. Word, phrase, related concepts, question, how to write with complex.
that came up in our breakout group. And then I put a link to a book. If maybe some people are familiar with Dictee. And it's this like very fragmented kind of interesting way of narrating something, right? Refusing kind of the linear norms of narrative.
Could you put that in this chat? Angela, could you put the thing that you referenced as well? That would be really cool.
I think it is in there, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it
Okay.
is. Yeah.
Beth, I'm starting us off here with that thought about embodied. Maybe you could add some of the other things.
Yes, so true.
Does everyone feel comfortable with how to add to this table? You just double click on the cell that you'd like to add into, and it should allow you to write. think in our group we spoke about people brought up references to like songs and some writing. Maybe we could try find a way to put this in the table.
I'll just take that as the other thing, Indigo Girls thing that came back to me as we were talking was one of their lyrics is don't write this down, remember it. Oh gosh, how does it finish? But I remember writing that in the cover of the first field notebook I took into the field because I felt that it was as important to be aware that I couldn't write everything down and that there were things that would always escape it, and I needed to somehow continue to pay attention to them. But that's not the title of one of their songs. Let me find that.
We had quite an interesting discussion in our group about Sarah was speaking about the trouble of kind of trying to remember what's happened in a research process that hasn't been recorded. And then there was kind of an interesting thing about, well, if you don't record things, then how do you work with that? But then when you do record things, sometimes it can be almost at the exclusion of the things that you don't end up recording, and the complexity of that, of the process of remembering. And then Sarah asked the thing of like, where, I don't know if I actually got it right of how you phrased it, but I wrote here, where do the things we forget go? It seemed like you were trying to grapple, maybe you want to say more on that, trying to grapple with the where is it?
I think you've added more to my comment than I maybe even originally had in mind. So
Sorry.
No. That was a very good summary and
Okay.
kind of synergizing of what I intended. Yeah.
Okay.
What really got me, I put this in tracing hauntings through research. I'm not sure it is tracing hauntings, but I'm reading this book at the moment by Vinciane Desprez, and it's called Our Grateful Dead. And what really got me is that she's researching stories of the dead, and so rather than having a research question, and it's just the way it developed, but instead of a research question is that she's listening to stories and then they tell her, for example, oh, you've got to watch this film. Oh, you've got to read this poem. Oh, you've got to listen to this song. Oh, you've got to watch this television series. And then she's following it all up as a kind of research, as a way of responding to her research participants. And I think it's so fascinating because she says, I would never watch this. I would never listen to this. I would never do that. And it has taken her to such unexpected places. And I thought, yeah, it was the trigger to hear what you were saying. Is there a difference between hauntings and tracings? And then I thought, traces. And then I thought, she's actually tracing hauntings of her research participants by following, going with, and attuning to, which reminds me a bit about the intimacy that you are talking about, Sylvia. You know, I don't know whether that's what Springay also means, but is being affected, becoming affected by what people say, what people do, and in an unpredicted way.
Yeah, I'm never quite sure what Stephanie Springay always means. But I love her work and I worked closely with her for a number of years. But so I can't speak for her, but I take it up as these nuanced, tiny things that are easily discarded for the big story to now what's happening in this moment at this time with these children, with this place and these materials, and not trying to analyze it all, but to see how the tiny things play together. And it's not just looking at the meaning in one thing, it's not looking at the meaning in something, but how it plays, how these small things play together and work together and interact together, and what could be produced from that.
Yeah, and also this prayer talks about the polyphony of stories, so that there are so many different stories that could be told, and that in education we tend to think of this one explanation, and I think in memory that's also, you know, through memory really get to the truth of things. But how many stories can be told, and rather than, and so she talks about this hierarchy of explanations, which really connects with the politics of memory, Asilia, that you are referring to. Some memories matter more than others, right?
This conversation makes me think about Susan Gannon and Bronwyn Davies' collective biography work. And so the ways that we wrote a piece, I think 12 of us are on that article. And it really kind of is a way to challenge the one narrative, right? Because you write the thing that you remember, and then everyone else kind of asks you, wait, pushes against that. And then you have to rewrite it, and you sort of realize the different choices, the things that you forgot, or the things that became overdetermined. So I think there are a lot of ways to work with these ideas about memory in practical ways in our work, in our different work.
Could you maybe say a little bit more about this thing you put in the chat of critical fabulation, please?
Sure. So Sadia Hartman writes about, among many other things, but slavery and the archive, right? So the ways that the archive of slavery really produced enslaved people as property. So there's like lists of who they were, and then their age, but them as people is not at all part of the archive of slavery. And so she has this method of critical fabulation where she does some fictionalizing from those archives. So I shared, I can share it in the whole chat, but I have the article. It's a short article. Is that enough of an explanation? Oh no, what did I
Yes,
do?
thank you.
I'll put the whole thing in the chat.
Thank you.
Of course.
I love the way you say it. It's short, you know. I think we're so used to saying that to our students, you know.
It's short but impactful.
Wow.
Did I do something? Uh-oh.
You can also actually just drag it and put it in the chat, possibly. That works on my computer. Do people perhaps want to speak about some of the things that they've written in this table? And keen to know what other groups we're talking about.
Beautiful in the meeting. Okay. Thank you. Love the title.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm I'm just rereading and I'm just questioning related concepts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth one down about Elizabeth St. Pierre saying that in fact words can never retain presence. And I'm just wondering, with all of the previous times we've been together, do we agree? Do we agree with that? I'm wondering. I'm kind of surprised, or maybe I'm misunderstanding what it means, because clearly her words do have presence, because here I am trying to figure it out. Yeah, and 11 years later. So what does that mean? Words can never retain presence. Does she really agree with that?
Sorry, that was me. I might have pulled the context a bit. So the bit they're talking about there is interviews and what counts as data. So like you would in sort of conventional qualitative research, we would privilege a participant's voice rather than someone. The example she uses is Foucault, because they're older. And not like in the moment. And so I think she's talking about presence in that sense, but that I think the value of them is exactly what you said, was that that's how they are still relevant, is because they manifest as presence. So they're remade in their use, and so therefore they still speak, and they're not bound by time the way we might think of empirical data as having to be have some immediacy to it. So that's my fault for cherry picking the quote. It was just easier to paste it than to explain. So sorry about that.
Makes sense now, though. Doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think St. Pierre, if you read her post-qualitative work, would really line to question that face-to-face interview to begin with as a very qualitative state of collecting data, right? So,
Absolutely.
and how do we even get memories if not by face-to-face interviews or interviews at all? How do we get people to remember if not to ask them questions? And I think that's what she's probably getting at. Now I understand. Thank you for the explanation. I was like, how does that make sense? But no, that totally makes sense. Thank you.
Is that kind of pointing at, like, when you're in an interview and someone says something to you, there's a myriad ways in which you're sensing that. And that's its presence. But once it becomes a word that's written down as a piece of text, it has a different materiality. And we keep privileging what we write down to the exclusion of the felt imprint of the experience. I guess we keep relying, or I don't know, that would be the thing I'm trying to outgrow, is continuing to rely on a transcript as if it captured something. When in fact, we need to be wary of that. Right? I need to be wary of that. Am I picking up on this correctly? The distinctions?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's where I sometimes feel guilty to do an interview at all, because I think of this, right? What does it, and then I think, what do interviews do? Or is it the transcript? Is it what the transcript does? And then you're in the responsibility, right? It's to be ethical to your participants. And then what do you do with the words or the transcripts or the interview? What will it be used? What will it do after the interview? And that's kind of where I focus. But it gets complicated when you read Elizabeth St. Pierre's work. It gets even more complicated. Angela, I thought you were complicating even more, but no, it's complicated, yes, but not more. So thank you again.
Oh, that's a compliment. I would like to complicate it even more. Thank you.
I have a question that's not entirely building on what's just been said, but I'm thinking about my own research and the complexity of engaging with so this thing of critical fabulation that Asilia shared, I guess is one way to do it, but engaging with the ghosts when the archive is so incomplete and stories and people and memories have been erased systematically. How do you engage with those ghosts when the archive is not there? I guess the one way is to fabulate and make stories to fill those gaps. But yeah, I'm really struggling with that idea. I wonder if anyone has something to say on that.
In my dissertation, we're going back a long time ago, I read Liz DeFreitas' piece on research as fiction. All research is fiction. So kind of this idea that they're like fictionalizing is a normal thing that is happening. And maybe it's about the degree. It also makes me think of Nathan Snaza's Animate Literacies, the intro, where he talks about kind of like how we are conditioned to notice some things and not notice others. I'm butchering the quote. That's not the quote, but that's essentially what he's saying. And kind of that the ways that memory can adhere to those same habits of noticing some things and another. So I feel like what kinds of ways of working with people's memory or what they say or events that pays attention to those things that are often ignored. So I teach a class on, it's called Geographies of Schooling, and it's just really about the agency of space and place. And they have these different experiments that they have to do. Like, how did this come to be? How did we come to be here together? Who was here before? And kind of a practice of asking those questions. Like, we're sitting at these desks. Where did these desks come from? Well, they likely came from incarcerated people who are working for pennies on the hour. And so like
Wow.
really kind of like practicing not taking the present for granted, but really a practice of inquiring into what people had to be moved for this building to come to be. These bricks had to be created in what are the effects of industrialization. So kind of like this ongoing practice of that and understanding that the story that comes from doing that is going to be a very different story.
That feels really related to some of the other topics that we've done, concepts that we've done, like thinking about entanglement and interaction and temporal diffraction. That's really helpful. Thank you. Mm.
Yeah, a question I have is presence, going back, returning to presence, and people's ideas about that, actually. Because I thought it was clear before we started, you know, sort of making sense of that quote, and now I think, well, what does that actually mean? How does that work? Being present.
It makes me think, Karen, of the workshop that we were in with Walter Cohen last week. And he was speaking a lot about presence. And even this idea that in English we say, oh, you must present yourself or do a presentation, but that we don't think about the fact that the word present is in there, and actually to present yourself is to make yourself present. And so what I understood of what he was saying is, instead of being like, oh, I present myself, I say that my name is George and I'm this and that and that, to that you ask a question to bring yourself into the present. Yeah, that's not an answer to your question, but I just made that connection when you were speaking.
No, it is a response, and I think that's really what I'm seeking, you know, like David, you were talking about interviews that you're doing as part of your research, and I thought, you know, one of the things I usually with kids, well, actually with anybody, I try to do philosophical inquiries, you know, communities of philosophical inquiry, and try not to do one-to-one, but as much as possible, try to get people to engage with one another in inquiry, which is question-led rather than sort of trying to move away from information. But you never, I'm always sort of asking myself, you know, are people, how but even the question is a problematic, I think. Which actually, no, I'm just thinking out loud, goes back to Asilia's point about the Freitas comment about fiction. It was fiction, was it? That she said, yeah, that all research is fiction. And my response would be say yes, but also no at the same time. because I'm not a believer of like there's a truth out there that we have to sort of map. But I also think that there is a reality that kicks back in its materiality sometimes. I think some things are more present than others. Yeah, I don't know, just complexify maybe presence.
The way I experience interviews is almost as though they're a creative sort of act. It's almost like a kind of yeah, creative, almost like a performance that both participants bring something to the interview that wouldn't be there otherwise. As you were saying, that it's not so much about finding information or finding data that's out there. But going back to the point about presence, it made me think of the idea of Jetztzeit, which Barad talks about in that 2017 article about how the present is kind of infused with all these other times and past and so on. It's never really only one time. And that's definitely true in an interview because there's so many hauntings there that sort of emerge.
Angela, maybe you can say it. I'm just doing this for the recording if people can't see it.
Sorry, I'm trying to hide.
No, don't hide.
Making it worse. I was writing on something this for a walking as research praxis group we did for the ECQI back in Edinburgh, which is why all these little quotes are stuck in my head. But this one's from Ezekiel Dixon Roman, and he talks about he says there are always already ghosts or hauntings in the seemingly present, an absence of presence, and a complex history and subjectivities. So maybe that's an expansion on the presence idea that there's presence and absence, and they're complex all together in the words maybe.
Thank you.
I think we're quite we've I think we would always land on the fact that it can never be just one thing, isn't it? That pluralism that makes it all so rich.
Ah, wow. That's an interesting link that has been put up there. Who put it up there?
Are you talking about the decolonial feminist?
Yes.
Yeah, it's we're reading it in my qualitative research class, or we read it, and it's pretty incredible. And she's drawing on using Toni Morrison and Dixie, which I also referenced, to think about her mother's death and her mother's memories. And she talks about bumping into her mother's memories and rememory. It's really an incredible text that is another example of what is possible, even with these complex ideas about memory and past and absence and hauntings.
Sure. So it's called Decolonial Feminist Research, Haunting, Rememory, and Mothers. And do you know how to pronounce her name?
Jung Eun Rhee.
Yeah, okay. So that's from 2021. Just saying this out loud also for the recordings. That was you, Celia. Yeah, great. We've got another kind of 5 minutes. So has anyone got another question? Could be for clarification, could be one that starts another inquiry. You might have a question about a question here. I have a question, if nobody has a question, about archive. I'm sort of really stretching. And I know some of my colleagues are doing that in Sweden. In Linköping, they do some amazing work with tiny archives. So these are the archives of children. I think I've talked about this before. About, what's that?
It was just a emotive sound, sorry.
Oh, about children putting stones in their pockets and or they go into daycare and then what they put in their pigeonholes. And so as I was looking through some of the artworks that the children have done in this project that I'm running at the moment, and then someone, as they were coming today into my office, they said, "Oh, wow, this is a whole archive." And then I thought, and the ethics of that too, you know. So yeah, the concept of archive and archiving, and yeah, it suddenly made me feel really uncomfortable. What I've been doing, you know, cutting out these things and putting them there and being so proud to display what amazing work the children have done. And I thought, what's going on? So what do we mean by archive? Memories are not archival, they're actively remade when remembered. And at the same time, they are an archive too, no?
Could I mention, since we're going to end soon, that there's the other side to the conversation, which is the voice, which we didn't, I didn't get much from that. It's empty on my screen. And so also the whole idea of the voice, it seems to, you know, it's just empty. I want to just acknowledge that our space for the voice is empty while it was part of our brief in the beginning.
Or maybe it was full. Maybe it's present. I'd like to know more about children's archives. Karin, do you have anything I could read? Yes, I can. I'll share it with you.
I wonder why we have. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you. That's all.
I'm just wondering why we archive, like to difficultate this word archive, and is it to place or put voice, right? To go back to bring it, link it to voice. Does it count because it's been archived, and who gets to archive things? And why do we feel bad to archive certain things? Is it because they normally don't have space in an archive, or like, why is it? Maybe that's too difficult to in the next 10 minutes. I'm not sure. Just I feel like that archive things are privileged things. You got to check them out. You got to check them in. Where, you know, depending on parts of the library, you can't even take them out. Who holds that privilege? Who has voice to be archived? It comes back to Angela, what you were saying about words can never retain presence. Do we archive students' work? Do I archive my own kids' work, or do I throw it out? Or
Thank
do
you
I
for
make
that.
Bye, Asilia. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yes. Yeah, but
What
I mean, I think this is the point as well of the work of my colleagues in Linköping, because, I think especially Anna Sparman's work is inspirational, because when you look at cultural heritage, they are the voices of adults. What's archived is adult stuff. And so it's amazing. And when you look at the sheer volume of archive, what was already archived, and a tiny, tiny bit that is archived by children. George?
when you all started talking about archives, I was thinking about something. I went to the Iziko Museum a while ago for a discussion on like decolonial approaches to archiving. And somebody said something really interesting, which always sat with me. It was a long time ago, so I might misquote them, but they were saying that often archives are places that things actually go to die, and that they gave this analogy of how you write something on a piece of paper and put it in your pocket so that you can allow yourself the freedom to forget it. Because you don't need to keep it in your mind if it's written down, and you can go and reference it later. And so they were talking about the importance of like keeping archives active and having kind of living active archives. Otherwise, it actually becomes this thing where you put something in archive because it's precious, but you put it there to allow yourself to forget about it. Which is really related to the fact that I don't know how it works in the rest of the world, but in South Africa, our national and like official archives are really expensive to access. Like you have to pay, I think by the hour, and the vast majority of people in South Africa can't afford to go and engage with archives, which I think is deeply problematic. But I don't know if it's like that in the rest of the world, or if it's an us thing.
There's
There's
an important kind of other side of that, which is, taking that idea that Eurocentric archives is a place where things go when they've been removed and extracted and are kind of a dead specimen of what they were. And I'm working with Jennifer Markides, who's a Métis scholar. She's introduced me to this idea that places are archives. They hold the memories. They are full of these meanings for generations. And when these are clear cut or used in extractive ways, so that there's a violence done to communities and how they archive that Eurocentric practices have done, where and I think it's quite interesting, because I think the meaning that is woven into places may be more akin to what children are doing when they place natural things together as a meaning making or a meaning holding process. But this is very different than what the institutional archive.
We had a Human Rights Day this past week, and I went to an archive which is called the Roland Street Archive, and it holds probably the oldest documents in South Africa. There was the question of the digitization of material, which they're busy with, but we discussed the whole presence of AI and how the physical specimens of writing is actually much more reliable than the online ones. I just thought I'd mention that.
I'm just wondering whether we should close the session, George. We've got 5 more minutes, and
Seems like a good time.
yeah, I mean, I think it's not enough time to start something afresh, and yeah, next week, maybe we can say something about next week, George.
Sure. Next week is our last week, and we'll be led by Candice Kubi. The reading is on things and thing power. So that's quite interesting. And I actually don't know what she has planned for us. So I'm keen to see. But I will, as always, share the recording of this session and then the reading for next session. And then after that, we'll be done with these sessions for a while, and we are in the process of constructing a survey. So
And
please look
just
out
to
for that.
say, to also, you know, to excite people about that, is that a couple of books that Mirka Kaur and I have been editing will come out on the 1st of August, and that also will be part of what we're going to do in autumn, spring, depending where you are. And there is a chapter there on the collective biography, actually in both books, on collective biography by, as a method that Asilia was talking about. So if that hasn't whet your appetite, I don't know what will. In the meantime, just really wish you a really good week, and hope to see you back on Monday. And yeah, for the last one.
Thank you.
I'm sure that it's going to be a fantastic session because, yeah, Candice does some amazing, amazing work. So really looking forward to seeing you back, and yeah, take care.
Thank you. Cheers.